Hello everyone, this is NSP. I'll be sharing the knowledge on C programming on behalf of Enlight Learning, which is an initiative taken to share the real-time experience. This session will be useful for the students at engineering first year level or an undergraduate students. Of course, it is not limited to engineering or undergraduate students. Anyone who are interested to learn the C programming, I can strongly say that this will be a very good start off. Here basically we will be covering the concept behind the C programming language. And there are a couple of sessions that I'm going to cover, basically a series of C programming divided into different parts. I'll try to show you what are the different parts involved in each video that I'm going to cover. Uh, let's look into it. So these are the different parts that I'm going to cover, starting from the computer system to different searching algorithms and um, basically covering all the things that are involved in C programming. Okay, um, this is the first part that we are going to cover in this session, starting the introduction of the components of a computer system along with the compilers, number systems, and bitwise operators. Okay, before entering into the core thing on the computer components and the compilers and all these things, let's try to understand why do you need this computer system and from where it got evaluated. Uh, Going a bit deep into these things, um, actually we are in an era of information technology where computers or its associates like mobile phones have become part and parcel of our day-to-day life. It can be directly or indirectly also. If we try to explore the information on rock age era, humans first started communicating through drawing pictures on rocks. Later, some sort of script starts evaluating and paper usage came into picture. And humans started thinking of storing this information permanently. And that's where actually they started like writing into the books. Of course, there were some other means of writing even before. When we see from the era of books, so that things can be remembered or things can be stored permanently. Let's try to concentrate on this word like storing data permanently. We will try to cover these three words in a couple of slides here. So later, telegraph and telephone started evaluating for communication system, and of course computers too, which even evaluated into much more digitalization as we are seeing now. Now let's understand more on computers. Why? Because everything got directly or indirectly touch basing on the computer system. So that's the reason actually in the format of information storing or information processing, we need a digital system, and that digital system is a computer. So let's try to understand in more detail into a computer system. So actually a computer is a device which stores the data in memory and which can also process the stored data as commanded. To store, retrieve, or process the data, certain components play important role in a computer system. At very high level, we can categorize computer as two parts, hardware and software. Computer system is the one we normally see with us in the format of desktop PC or a laptop, but it does not end over there. A computer system exists in lot of places, which we may not be visualizing it directly, but it is embedded into other systems like we see, right, ATMs, or it might be a passenger vehicles or in aeroplanes. Of course, in many more home appliances like refrigerator or a washing machine. To some extent, the common line we can derive across the eras is couple of things like way of communicating the information and storing that communicated information. So that's where actually the computer system is able to perform, and in this couple of computer components are playing very important role. Let's try to understand what these components are and how they work. When we are working around the computers, we normally hear the terms like hardware and software, where hardware is the term given to physical devices and circuitry of the computer, like a motherboard or it might be a RAM. Whereas software is the program, like it is a set of instructions which helps user to perform is required operations like working on a Word document, like working on a MS Word, where MS Word itself is a software tool. So at an high level, we can categorize a computer as one hardware component and another as a software component. Now, this particular block diagram shows a simple microcomputer where major parts are central processing unit, called as in simple term called as CPU, memory, and IO, like input and output circuitry, where CPU control the entire it controls the entire computer system actually, where actually the CPU contains one control unit and ALU, it is called as an arithmetic logic unit, and registers. These components are connected by buses which are of three types. If you see here, there are three different types of lines that different colors that I try to categorize here. So these are the buses actually, and these buses with colors actually has some there are differentiation for this one. Like if you see, I'll try to cover it a bit later. Before entering into what these buses are and all these things, if you see here, we have a memory segment here, like a memory component, where memory consists of either RAM or ROM usually. Of course, both in a computer, and there are different other memories also we will try to cover. Memory has basically two purposes. The first one is it stores the binary codes for the sequence of instructions, like the software program, like what you are trying or what you are expecting from your computer to be done for you. And the second one is to store your data. That's the job of a memory in a computer. The next one is IO. Here, input allows computer to take data from the outside, like using peripherals like keyboard, and output allows computer to send the data to the outside world, like monitor, what we see normally, or playing a video. It is an output basically. And CPU. This is the central processing unit which controls the operation of computer, which is basically the brain of a computer. CPU like contains all these three together: control unit, ALU, and registers. CPU fetches instructions from memory, what you try to feed to the computer, decodes that instructions into a series of simple actions and converts those actions into a series of steps. Don't get confused. We will try to cover some of the things that got involved behind this one, so that we will try to understand more. Okay. If you see here, the other things like the address bars and the control bar and the data bus, basically the data bus, address bus, and control bus, where this address bus are signal lines where the CPU uses it to locate the memory locations. If you see here, these address buses from input, CPU to input, CPU to output, and CPU to memory. It basically tries to locate the memory locations. And this particular address lines in the CPU can locate 2 to the power of n addresses locations, where n is the number of address lines that are available in a given computer. Of course, this is a one directional. If you see here, this is a one directional. It can it can communicate from CPU to input, but not from input to CPU. I'm trying to say on the address lines. If you take an example like a computer has two address lines, so it is clear that it can locate only 4 memory locations. It is based on the 2 to the power of n calculation. The other thing is the data bus signals. where CPU can read data from memory, or from input port, or it can send data out to memory or to output ports. It is basically the bidirectional. If you see here, the data bus lines, it can communicate to and fro between input memory, output and memory, between CPU and memory location also. Okay, so this is something on the data bus lines. And the other one which is very important in the given computer system is control bus signals, where CPU sends signals like enable, either read write format over the memory or to input output ports. If you see here, the control lines, it is basically communicating between CPU to output, input to CPU, and also to memory to CPU, and it is going to be a bidirectional basically. And if you see here, let's take an example here. If you want to read a byte of data from memory location, for example, the CPU sends out the memory address to the desired byte on the address bus. If you see here, CPU sends out on an address bus to the memory location, and then sends out a memory read signal. If you see here, through its control bus, it sends out a memory read signal on the memory read signal. Then memory read signal enables the address memory devices to output a data word onto the data bus. So once it receives the control from the CPU to the memory, then it starts sending the data over the data bus. So these are the we try to cover all these three steps with a control bus. I mean, when we take an example of a control bus. So there are, if you see here, uh, I think we try to cover CPU, input, output, of course, power supply. That's not really falls under the digital system, but anyhow, that is one other component of a computer system, important component, right? Let's move on to, yeah. If you see, we try to say like, okay, CPU is of three different categories, where it has control unit, ALU, and registers. Let's see, arithmetic logic unit, basically ALU mean like whatever the operations that we are trying to do, like addition, subtractions, or divisions, anything arithmetic related, we definitely need a separate module, a separate component in the CPU, which is called as an ALU module. With this particular ALU module only, we are able to perform the mathematical operations. Of course, if you want to do a logical operators like AND condition or OR conditions also, this particular unit is very important. And control unit, of course, we try to cover that one. It is basically the controls the operations in a sequence as commanded. As before we mentioned, like a control bus, address bus, and a data bus, how it is commanding between different components. Memory unit, we try to cover, it basically stores every data in the format of zeros and ones only, which is called bit. We will try to cover that. Registers, actually, this is special purpose high speed memory components. These are also memory components, no big difference, but other than it has a special job for it to perform. It is very fast compared to the memory access. um, I'm not really trying to cover much on these registers in this video. Um, okay, let's move on. Of course, registers are basically different types, as we are saying is PC, accumulator, or data registers, or MAR and MBR. They have their own specific jobs to execute, which is really very fast when we try to cover. I mean to say, like when we try to utilize these registers, the operations will be very much faster compared to accessing the memory locations. And IO system. Yeah, we know, right? IO, when it comes to the inputs, there are different peripherals available over the inputs here. And inputs and outputs, as I mentioned here, these are the different peripherals that normally we try to equip on our computer system. And moving on, yeah, memory locations. So as we are looking into this memory, it is one of the very important component along with the CPU. to store your data or to execute your instructions. But when we say memory, we can classify these memories into different categories, but there is a baseline for categorizing these memories. At an high level, we can categorize the memories as this is not something related to the computer in general, a volatile memory or a non-volatile memory. When we say a volatile memory, it loses its data once power off. But whereas non-volatile memory retains the data even you switch off your computer, or if you plug out your power or battery backup to particular device, the data will be retained forever. So that is called as a non-volatile memory, as the name resembles here, volatile and non-volatile. Whereas the examples of these volatile memories or the components that falls under these volatile memories are the normal term that we hear is RAM. And whereas in the non-volatile, uh, the very first we can recollect on this one is ROM and floppy disk. But there are other type of memories also here: memory tape, memory disk, and optical disk. But the general things that we normally hear is ROM and floppy disks. Let's move on. Of course, memory disk is also a well-known. Of course, everything that we are saying it here are familiarized only. Let's move on and see what these classifications and what is the other classification of this memory. The other classification of this memory is based on the computer architecture. I'm trying to say this one: primary and secondary memory. Where this primary memory is the memory that already available within the computer. And the one other important factor or the underlying factor of this primary memory is this is the memory where the CPU can directly access or which directly works directly with this particular memory location. CPU can directly work with these memory locations. But whereas the secondary memory, of course, this is normally not available within the computer, but it will be auxiliary or an optional. The one different aspect of these secondary memory locations are it is not directly accessible by the CPU. Mean like if you have some data in your secondary memory, first it has to be copied into the primary memory. Of course, computer does it. We don't want to do it. And from there the CPU tries to process. Mean like if there is a secondary memory, if there is a data in our secondary memory, once you try to feed it to the computer system, CPU will try to contact to the primary memory only and get the data into it, mean like into the primary, and then process it and put it back into the primary, and then it is carried into the secondary memory locations. So here the categorize on the primary and secondary, the examples are generally RAM and ROM over the primary sector, and optical memory, memory tape, and memory disk on the secondary. Let's try to see more details about this primary and secondary. So when we say like the RAM, random access memory, this is of course the operational sequence that is over, try to put it over here. As the name resembles, data cannot be stored permanently as we are discussing on this one. But I will try to cover what is the write operation and the read operations over here. So as the RAM mean like we can read and also we can write into it. Whereas the ROM, we can just read but we cannot write into the memory locations. So let's try to see on operations how we execute it. So to perform a write operation, place the address. First we need to locate the address, right? So place the address over the address bar where the data has to be written, and then send the data over the data bus. See here, the blue one. Send the data over the data bus. What is the data that you are trying to store in? And then activate the write command. Why? Because this is storing, right? You have to activate the write command. So this is the first address bus. On an address bar, you have to put your address where the memory has to be or where the data has to be stored, and then try to put the data what you have to be stored in the data bus, and then enable the write command. That's it. So this is going to store the data in the RAM locations. And if you want to do a read operation, similar way, put the address address over the address bar from where you are trying to read the data, and here we don't want the data input. Why? Because we are not going to store the data. So enable the read command, and you can now observe the data over the data output. Now, of course, there are two types of RAM here, SRAM and DRAM, static RAM and dynamic RAM. Now, read-only memory. Hey, actually, the data doesn't gets lost in ROM here. It is going to be the permanent. That's what we are trying to discuss, right? One important thing here, random access memory. Why this name came over the random is we can get the data from any locations over the RAM here. For example, the data from this particular location, the data from this particular location. Apart from, it is not going to be the like permanent storage. It is not named over with whether it is going to store the data permanently or not. It is named based on the anywhere from any location we can access the memory randomly. So that's the main reason how it is being named. Okay, move on. Read-only memory. When it comes to read-only memory, see here the difference between RAM and, so are you seeing any big differences between the diagrams over here and here? Yeah, I hope you are able to identify that one. So in RAM we have data input along with that read and write operations, but ROM doesn't need those things. Why? Because ROM is just for read only. Then why do once you try to put some address over there, so the job of the ROM is just read all. I mean, it can only give you the data what it is already been stored inside it, right? So once you try to access its location, it feels that okay, I need to give the data output. That's it. So once you try to put the address over our address bar, enough, the data will be sent out over the display system. So do we really need any explicit read command here? Not required. Of course, we don't have ROM doesn't allow you to write into also, so we don't require a write operations also. Right. Let's move on. Then what is the purpose of this RAM and who stores the data into RAM? Somewhere the data has to be stored, right? Then only we can access it. So this is something, RAM doesn't mean that we can never write into it. Yes, we can write into it, but it normally comes with our operating system. During when we purchase a computer, normally the in computer, what is it like, uh, uh, computer shops itself, normally whenever we try to buy this particular system, people will store the operating system into it and then lock it. That's where we cannot again open that one and write something data into it. That is the reason we are trying to say it's only read only, but that doesn't mean that we can never write into it. It's one time writable. Feel it like it is writable at the manufacturing level itself. That's it. So these two are the primary areas, primary memory locations. Of course, we have, don't get confused with the EEPROM memory. When we say EEPROM, normally RAM is a single time writable thing, like programmable RAM, one time programming. Okay, and the other one is EEPROM, where we can rewrite into it, but as I'm saying it, like, don't get confused with the ROM read only and again people trying to say EEPROM. Normally EEPROMs are used in embedded system applications, where before people handovering the hardware system along with the software to the customer, people has to R&D over the programs. So they are supposed to read and write into it, rewrite into the ROM. So that's where actually there are electrically erasable programmable ROMs available. Meaning like on a manufacturer level, as I mentioned, you can read write, but once it is been handed over to the user or end user or a client, it cannot be write into it at all. So that is the reason people call it as a ROM. Not people, the manufacturers or the very first initial stage, they try to name it like read-only memory. But still it is allowable to write, but only at the manufacturer stage. And another memory, another classification of the ROM comes under the flash memory. These are the three types of ROMs, right? Here we saw like primary, of course, we try to cover only the RAM and ROM, that's okay. And secondary, optical memory, memory tape, and memory disk. I will try to cover the the secondary memory related things are magnetic tape. The very first one is magnetic tape. You people might have saw like a tape recorder, the tape in a tape recorder. So that particular tape is a long wire, long. If you see that one, it is a very long wire. It seems to be like a very long distance wire, but actually that particular one is the we try to store over the data. It might be an audio or it might be an video, where if you see like in a movies or like in a cinema recording studios, we try to store the data over again in the memory tapes, or which we call it as a magnetic tape. So basically this is a plastic material which a magnetic material is coated over there. So that really, that particular magnetic material is the one which really helps in storing the data. So simply going into the write operations, actually magnetization and demagnetization is the concept here. When you try to, if you want to write a bit value of 1 over there, there will be a system which will be a recording head, which we call it as a recording head. With that, if you try to magnetize, a bit value of 1 will be stored over there, and demagnetize, a bit value of 0 will be stored over here. Meaning like if you want to store cinema over there, that particular cinema, it will be binary format of that particular word cinema will be there will be some binary format which we are going to cover it, what is this binary and the decimal systems. That particular binary format means entire cinema will be converted into ones and zeros, a sequence of ones and zeros. So that particular ones and zeros will be stored in the format of magnetization, demagnetization, magnetization or demagnetization. That's how the write operation will be performed. And the read operation, it's the playback head which really helps again in the magnetization and demagnetization and convert back into electrical signals. So this is something on the magnetic tape. Of course, magnetic disk also the same one. It is also but here it is a plastic material which is used to store the data upon which a magnetic material coating is there. But whereas magnetic disk, it is a metal alloy on which magnetic material coating will be there. The operations are the same, like magnetization and the demagnetization, but the big difference between the magnetic tape and this one is magnetic tape is you might have saw, right, it will be very it is easy to damage over there. It doesn't have the real strength. But magnetic disc are as I mentioned here, like it is a metal alloy, right, it will be strong compared to the magnetic tape. And of course it is in a sealed adjustable package, which really free from it has the free from dust packing system. So the write and read operations are almost same. I'm not going to cover in detail over here, as it is similar to the magnetic tape, the read write operations. And the optical disc, when it comes to the optical disc here, um, like our CDs, what we see like in a system, in a computer system, of course we are not, the recent computer systems are not equipped with the CD drives. When we have a different memory formats, when you have different memory devices in on board. But this is something like optical disc. Couple of people might have some, still people might remember this one. Here actually this optical disc is again a plastic material which will be in a round shape, but read write operations are a bit different, whereas previously it is like magnetization and demagnetization, but here actually we use the laser diode. If you spot in a particular area, like I'm trying it in a very high level to record a number 1 over there, you need to spot a laser light over there. So it gets heated and there will be a small bubble type of thing which recognizes it as it has been written as 1. If you are not doing that one, it will go it as 0. So that ones and zeros will be stored based on the focusing the laser light over there, meaning like heating up and not heating over there. But actually this is something like a metal alloy being used over here. So yeah, the ones and zeros concepts are same, like putting the laser diode, focusing the laser diode and heating it up over there. So there are three different types of um, optical discs, which is called as which normally as one is an optical ROM, which is only just for read only. uh, you cannot write it from your system also. There is, you might have seen like a read RW, over here. Here if you see here, it is just R. If you see RW over here, meaning like it is a read write. You can write into it and you can erase and you can rewrite into the particular system. So there is another type of optical disk. And of course there is one more thing like read only, write once, read many times. So these are the three different types of optical disks. So moving on, operating system. Right. So when it comes to operating systems, it is actually a program. In simple, we can say like it is a program, a set of instructions being defined to the computer to execute our basic operations, whatever that you feel, whatever that you desire to do it on your computer. But whatever the operating system right now we are seeing, there are of course we have a lot many operating systems available. But actually we are in a certain generation where it is very much comfortable for the users, and also it makes our jobs easy with the computers that are available in front of us. But actually the journey of this operating system is a very long journey here. It started from its 1940, where the very first operating system has been of course we don't want to really call it as an operating system. Why? Because we don't have the operating system during the first generations, but still some operations are executed with the machine language, meaning like without an operating system we try to do some set of instructions. Of course those are predefined and a minimal instructions during the very first stage. We term it as a first generation. Of course we try to write it over the machine language. Whereas the second generation, General Motors developed an operating system for IBM computers, mainframes. So here actually this particular operating system also has a minimal operations that it can execute. So that is the second generation. And the third generation is something like multiple programming concepts came into picture, meaning like the operating system has been evaluated such a way that we can perform a multiple programs over there. And also the one other important thing is mini computers came into picture, and this is the actually, I mean this is the actually which is the base for the present computers what we are seeing. um, so in the fourth generation, personal computers like microcomputers came into picture, and we have the portable operating system which is developed by Windows. So whatever that most of the computers are carrying, we are saying right to Windows operating systems. So that played a major role when it comes to the portable operating systems, or when we say like on the personal computers. But there are different generations. Normally some we might be quoting like fifth generation or something like that, but let's hold on here. Like there are main four categories on the generation front. So when we see types of operating systems, there are many types. What I mentioned, what I try to mention here, from the single user to distributed or embedded real-time operating system, which is very time critical operating system, and time sharing. In simple, I will try to cover what is this time sharing operating system. Um, when it comes to the time sharing operating system, for example, if you want to use the same, there will be only one computer system. When we say time sharing, like IBM mainframe computer system, it is a very huge computer. It will be occupied in a single room. The entire computer, the only one computer will be occupying the entire room over there. So let's say like if you want that particular computer, it can what you say like accommodate two or three users. We can see like it is a single time, but actually it has time sharing concept inside it. For example, if you want to I mean if many users are using on a single system, the time will be divided across the users, so that for the user one, if he is trying to type the word, if he's trying to type the number 2 over there, some time will be allocated to that user. Some 20 milliseconds or 10 milliseconds will be allocated to that user, and after that user normally takes some time, right, to type between number 2 and number 3 or number 4. So in this meanwhile, it will hand over the resource to the second user. So where he might be trying to do some other operations from his friend, or he might be taking a print from there, and again it will come back to the first user where he will be typing the key over the number 6. So like this, the time sharing or the time slicing will happen between different users, but still there will be only one single computer. The reason is users normally take more time to operate than a computer, right? So computer, rather than sitting idle, it will try to share its resources across the different users. So that's something a bit on the time sharing. I'm trying to cover very high level, like there are different other operating systems also. So now let's move on to the other topic, very important topic where our core thing will cover from here, like programming and all these things. So now, till now, we have an idea on components of a computer and its purposes. Now let's start thinking of programming. I mean, developing a software, how to run a program. So, I mean, basically using the computer. Actually, there are three different languages or three levels of languages that we can, sorry, that can be used to write a program into a computer, or mean like to into a processor. When we say computer, it is not a directly to a processor. So let's try to cover from, there are three different languages. The very first one is the machine language, assembly language, high level language. Let's start from the machine language. What this machine language is actually. So this machine language, it is a program written in a binary form, meaning binary form, ones and zeros. We will try to see what is this ones and zeros. So when we try to write into in a binary form, in like ones and zeros, it is nothing but a machine language, where this particular ones and zeros is the only language or the only instructions that a machine or a processor understands. So it requires in ones and zeros only. Of course, it understands the in ones and zeros format only. However, it is very difficult for a programmer to remember thousands of binary instructions, and there is a large chance of writing a wrong code where the entire program will be just zeros and ones. Why I'm saying like there will be a confusion over here is, if you see here, if you want to add, if you want to write a add command, see, in a machine language this is how an add command will be appearing, like 0 0 0s and 1 0 0. So this, if you try to type like 1 0 0, I mean in this format, then the machine or the processor understand it says like an add operation. Just imagine how difficult it will be if you want to write a program to execute or to find out 2 to the power of n. Okay, now let's move on. Okay, in this difficult time, I mean, as we are saying, like a machine language is very difficult. Let's see any other languages available. Yes, so we have the another language called as assembly language. Actually, this is much easier compared to the machine language, and this is a better version of coding in the form of assembly language. But actually this, whatever that you try to type it or you try to code it in the assembly language, this has to be translated into machine language. Of course, I'll try to cover how to translate these things into machine language. But actually this is much simpler compared to the machine language here. Why? Because here you don't want to remember uh, this particular command 0 zeros and 1 0 to perform an add operation. If you see here, you can just put add. If you want to add a plus b, you can try to use this command add, which we call it as mnemonics. This is the better compared to a machine language. Of course, it needs a translator or a converter. Why? Because machine language is directly understandable by the processor. So assembly language is not directly understandable by the processor. So we need a translator between assembly language to machine language. That is the only additional step that requires, but programmer feels much comfortable compared to machine language writing. So here there is one more. Another way of writing a program is with high-level language such as C, C++, Java. These languages use a program statements looking similar to English language or generally used symbols like plus, minus, division symbols. And this is compared to the assembly language, this is much more better for programmers. But the processor cannot understand this high level language again, so it has to be converted into assembly language, and that assembly language again has to be converted into machine language. But if you want to write in a perform an add operation, see here, you can just put a symbol. See the comfort levels that been adapted from the machine language to assembly language and assembly language to high level language. Here you need to write some instruction, some zeros one sequence, and here you can just write add, and here you can just use the plus symbol over there. So this is the evolution that happened from the machine language to high level programming languages. And moving on, okay, I mentioned, right, why do we need these things here, high level language, assembly language, and when we are speaking about the high level language to the machine language, so we need the translators, right? Let's move on. Okay, when we say translators, see, programmers are much comfortable in writing a program in high level language. Okay, he start writing the program. If he tries to dump that program, or if he tries to store that program in the processor, will the processor detects that one, or even the processor understands that? Not at all. So that's where the first difficulty comes. So programmer are comfortable in writing the program in high level language, but this requires the program in the microcode, meaning like in the machine language, where the programmer is not comfortable, or he might feel difficulty in writing that particular code in machine language. So what is the solution then? Okay, let's see. Let programmer write the coding or the program in whichever he is comfortable, like in high level language. And we have a catalyst here. Of course, if you are aware of that word catalyst, it really it tries to help out, right? It doesn't do really anything over there in the processor. It just try to help out outside. So here the compiler actually, not before going into the processor, in the I mean in the computer itself, before you try to put it in the processor, there will be a tools for compilation, and that tool helps to convert your high level language into a machine language. Happy, right? So this makes the programmer happy, and this makes the processor also happy. Why? Because it receives the code what it in the right format, what it has to be, what it can understand, and programmer still he can go ahead and write in the language what he is comfortable. So he or she comfortable. So this is where actually the compiler helps in converting program written in C language into microcode, if we take an example of a C language. So, but what are the different steps that are involved in doing this particular operation? Like converting this particular high level language into a machine language. We are saying, right, there is a compiler, and what it really does here. See, this high level language will first go to the preprocessor, and then that once the I will let you know what is the what is the things that are involved in this pre-processing. Just try to look into this one. High level language will be pre-processed with preprocessor, and then compilation steps get started. Once compilation gets through, I mean it converts into the assembly language, and this assembly language will finally convert into the machine language by the assembler. But we will be having one more step here called as linker. Let's see with an example. For example, you are written a code, and in that particular C file there might be a macro like define num_a10, or there might be one header file being included. So these two steps, of course there are many other pre-processing things, but I'm trying to take examples like defining a number and including an header file. So these two things will be replaced by its the real things. For example, num_a, if you're trying to use this num_a, this num_a will be replaced with 10, and the content in the header file will be try to put it into the C file, and this step will be done at the pre-processing stage, and then compilation starts. So this C file will be converted into the ASM, like whatever the code that you are written in the comfortable language, in the C language, that entire code will be converted into ADD, SUB, or move operation, something like that, which is an assembly language, right? So the entire C will be converted into an assembly language where the format is .asm format. And with assembler, this assembly actually converts the entire ASM logic into, the assembler code into the object code, where the object code mean like it converts into 1 zeros, 0 ones and everything. And then why do we need a linker? See, actually the steps ends here. So pre-processor, compiler, assembler, which converts into machine code. But why do we need a linker? For example, if you have written a code in two different files, file1.c, file2.c, meaning like your entire program is divided into two files. So one file will, the .c will be converted into one.o, the other .c will be converted into other.o. So you need a linking, right, between these two .os. That's where actually the linker comes into picture. If you have different object files, and if you want to convert that entire object files into an executable file, this is where actually the linker helps in converting the entire object files into final .exe file or .dll file, whatever the final compiler or the compiling tool will really convert into. So this is how an high-level language being converted into machine language with the help of compiler, and these are the different steps involved. Let's move on. And at any point of time, compilation got failed. So developer are supposed to go back and look into the code. Of course, compilers are good enough and they are very much sensitive in giving a good information where it got failed and what is the reason for the failures. And based on that, developers or the programmers can go back and fix it and reinitiate the entire process. Of course, when we say reinitiate the entire process, we don't want to do the step 1, step 2, step 3 separately. Compilers, if you just initiate once, there are GUI related compilers, just click it, you will get the output. Of course, if you are trying to do it over the command, it's a different step, it's a different process. I will let you know. And yes, we try to cover the compiler also, moving on to the computer number system and its codes. Okay, we try to understand the purpose of the compiler. Now coming into the number systems, why do we need these number systems? Why? Because just before when we try to understand the compilation steps, the high-level language being converted into the machine code, and the machine code is entered in the format of ones and zeros. So that's where, right, the purpose is, there is a real purpose in learning about these numbers also. So to understand more on how a computer functions, we definitely need to understand the number systems. Why? Because there are different number systems, mainly 3 different number systems are there. So those number systems are, the very first one, decimal number system, which we are very much familiar, and that is our day in and out when we are trying to deal with any mathematical related things, or even general or day-to-day based things. So that is the decimal system over here. Actually, decimal system, the base of this decimal system is 10. The base is 10 for this one. So why this, why we are calling it as a base 10 and all these things, maybe I will try to highlight it at the end of the session. Here there are total 10 numbers available in a decimal system. The 10 numbers are 0 to 9. Okay, and this is how actually it represents. Let's hold it on. Let's try to cover the binary system, and then we will try to move on to the right side one. The other system is binary system. If you see here, the binary system actually has only 2 numbers, and its base is 2. Actually, binary system only capable of like, I can't say capable. It is a system with only 2 numbers over here. So 2 numbers, 0 and 1. And the other system is hexadecimal system, where the hexadecimal system base is 16, and this number system contains total 16 numbers. If you see here, 0 to 9, and it is not starting to, it is not moving to 10. Why? Because 10 is not really I mean, it is a combination of the numbers, but it is not an independent number like 0 to 9. So that's where actually hexadecimal system came into picture, and they started, I mean, the people who defined it started from, continued from 9 with A, B, C, D, E, and F. That's where actually the 16 combinations came into picture. Now let's see why we are saying it as base 16, why it is base 2 and base 10. If you see here, there are only 10 numbers, base 10. There are only 2 numbers, base 2. There are 16 numbers, base 16. That's where actually the base is being correlated with respect to the maximum numbers that a system can hold or a system can deal with. Okay, so here requires 2 digits to store 100 numbers, whereas a decimal system, if you want to store, for example, a max of 100 numbers, meaning like 0 to 99, so you require 2 digits actually. Whereas see, a binary system, it can just store only 3 numbers. Whereas hexadecimal system, if you are given 2 digits capability, if you say, if you commanded hexadecimal system like, I'm going to give you 2 digits, tell me how many numbers you can store over there. 255 numbers we can store. We will try to see how it is. So if it is a 2 digits are given, and in a decimal system we can just store 100 numbers. In a binary system we can just store only 3 numbers, whereas hexadecimal system 255 numbers. So which one has the max capacity to store with the minimum storage given? Hexadecimal system. But still, it is not, binary system is not stopping us from learning. Why? Because it is the base, and it is the only language, or it is the only number system that a processor can understand. So we need to, this is the general, this is the machine, and this is how normally programmers feel comfortable, and most of the things will be deal in programming. And if you see here, uh, okay, as I mentioned base 10, right? That's the reason actually we are trying to make it power with 10, and here power with 2, and here the power with 16. So 0, the first location, second location, third location, and fourth location. This is how the numbers been correlated. And for a given number of 24, if you take a 24 number, if you take a decimal system, this is how it is being represented here. And a binary system, it occupied almost 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 digits, whereas it occupied only 2 digits. Of course, hexadecimal also occupied 2 digits, but the number is much lesser compared to the decimal system. Let's move on. We will try to cover here. Um, okay, when we say like, okay, I have given 24 to you, a decimal number of 24. Just interpret it. How this 24 came into picture? How you can interpret this 24? How we can interpret this 24 is, this 24, actually when we say decimal system, the base is 10, right? See here, the first thing starts with 0, the second power is 1, the third power is 2, fourth power is 3. So that's how it starts from the 0 to it keeps on going. And in this case, when it is a number of 24, the fourth one, it is at the 0th position, meaning like it will be 10 to the power of 4 times to the 4. And the number 2, it will be 10 to the power of 1 times to the 2. Am I doing wrong here? Yes, I've done a wrong here. Let me correct.